All right, in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to give a quick overview of the changes we did and why. Really, this whole 3-hour presentation is focused on what did we change. So if you're familiar with the city's design requirements, this is what changed. So we'll specifically start with conveyance design, and then we'll talk about our new conveyance permit that will come into effect. We'll talk about some minor changes to hydrology calculations, as well as stormwater calculations and impervious limits for infill development. Then we'll take a break. We'll cover SCM design, SCM O&M manuals and as-built, some additional easement info that won't be covered in those other presentations, erosion sediment control, flood studies, submittal requirements, and then a brief wrap up. You're welcome to raise your hand and ask questions during the presentation. We'll pause for questions at the end of each subject matter. I will ask for online questions as well. I want to introduce the city staff that are here today. So in terms of our stormwater plan review team, as I said, I'm Sally Hoyt. We also have Nathan and Sean and Kendall and Ross and Alan and Lauren and Brian and Molly and Donnell. So that's the plan review team. We also have representation from the city's floodplain team. So we have Allison Bryan and Seamus Riley out in the foyer. And we have Cam from our inspections team. And then we have a couple of representatives from planning and development. We've got Celia and Kareem. All right. And so we all wore our city branded stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask any of us, and we'll definitely stick around afterwards with the idea of being able to answer questions that didn't get addressed as the group. All right. So why did we make changes? Well, one reason is that our stormwater design manual was published in 2002, which is a long time ago, and just things have changed in the industry. For example, polypropylene pipe wasn't addressed in there because I don't know that it was a commonly used product in 2002. We also have attempted to address some of the frequent concerns that we hear from the residents of Raleigh. And we are making a big effort to ensure quality infrastructure, both in terms of conveyance infrastructure and stormwater control measures. If you have not yet seen the changes, you can Google Raleigh Stormwater Manual and it will be the first result for most people. And this is the direct URL. When you go to that page, if you scroll down past the picture and the header, there's a section that says New Design Manual. That's it. And the second link there is actually, we made some associated changes to the Unified Development Ordinance. So those are in that second document. These changes officially become effective on Saturday, November 2nd, which is 60 days after they were adopted by City Council. So effectively, submittals on Monday, November 4th will need to meet the requirements in the updated UDO and the new design manual. Because of permit choice, if you have a project that was submitted prior to that date, you can choose to use the new manual and new regulations instead. There will be specific circumstances where people would find that advantageous. I just want to briefly highlight the process we went through. I know some of you were involved in that process. This current effort started back in 2019. We posted several drafts for informal comment and received over 600 comments during that period. We met with people as requested, including several meetings with the Home Builders Association, as well as some with designers. This went into the formal process in 2024, where it went to the city's planning commission and then to City Council, and was approved, as I said, on September 3rd. And as a little bit of municipal trivia, the design manual is referenced by the UDO, therefore it is part of the UDO and cannot be changed without going to city council, which is why it was such a long process. This is a summary of the comments that we received in that pie chart. Basically, the orange is folks who self-identified as designers. Gray is people affiliated with the Home Builders Association. Yellow was industry groups, like we got comments from the Concrete Pipe Association, for example. And the blue was folks who identified as residents and not one of those other things. And then you can see by chapter how many we got. So hot topics in chapters 2 and 4, which is why we're doing chapter 4 first. All right, that's what I have for an intro. Any questions before we dive into the technical information? All right, Molly is up.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start with our chapter 4 stormwater conveyance design. I will not be going through everything that's in the chapter. We're just going to hit a lot of the high points because there is a lot of detail to the changes. We're starting with gravity design. So no pumping will be allowed on any system on public or private property except noted in section 6.3.1. So no stormwater design devices that are pumped. One of the big things that was discussed was flow leaving the site. So that's going to be 4.2.3. So when you have a site that's greater than 1 acre used for 1 or 2 unit dwellings or greater than 0.5 acres used for all other uses, you're going to have newly concentrated flow into pipes or swales leaving the site in one of the following methods. So all new pipe or swale leaving in either an approved discharge to a jurisdictional stream or stream buffer, connection to the right-of-way, or discharge to an existing or proposed public or private drainage easement. Lot grading plans. So this is part of 2.1, but just like a same genre. So sites that are less than or equal to 1 acre used for 1 or 2 unit dwellings or less than 0.5 acres for all of their uses. Those sites have requirements on their newly constructed flows into pipes or swales leaving the sites too. So specifically for those, we're looking at the options that were listed in the previous slide, or rain garden, disconnected impervious surface, or a surface infiltration pit. So in total, these are all of the options listed for those specific types. So this is just relisting what we saw in the last 2 slides. 7.2 is on easements. So this one is specifically called an upstream discharge easement. So on new developments, the establishment of a drainage easement on the property being developed shall be required as follows. If the flow enters your development via a stream, no drainage easement is required. If flow enters in an existing or proposed pipe or swale, then drainage easements shall be provided per section 7.3, which is another easement section. If flow enters via sheet flow, then 1 20-foot wide drainage easement will be required for each entering drainage area of 1 acre or more. So you're establishing easements for whatever sites are up, whatever site or possibly sites are upstream of your development to ensure that they'll have a way to be able to relieve flow So you're not necessarily blocking off somebody who could develop in the future upstream of you. This is going to be another big one. So 4.2.3 is about existing systems. So existing stormwater conveyance systems on the site or in the half of the city right-of-way adjacent to the property and parallel to the lanes shall be analyzed with any tier 3 site plan. So tier 3 site plan, anything that's on your site that you're going to keep on your site, and anything in your half of the right-of-way will need to be analyzed. Systems that do not meet the requirements of this chapter for capacity or condition as identified by the visual pipe inspection on site done by you or in the city right of way done by the city shall be replaced or improved to meet criteria. So here you're looking at, for example, when I say half of the city right of way parallel, it's going to be what's on half of the city right of way on your side of the road. So the pipe that runs north to south would be one that you would analyze given the city's CCTV information. The pipe that runs east to west would not, because it's only in, or it's half of your right of way. Thoughts, questions? Great. Public versus private infrastructure. So structures and pipes size 15 inches or greater and located within the right-of-way are publicly maintained stormwater infrastructure, specifically excluding any driveway culverts. To go with that, we also have the public drainage easements. So this is a new drainage easement, specifically public related. So we'll have public drainage easements and private drainage easements. As a public drainage easement, there are a couple categories that you can fall into that would qualify you for the public aspect. So anything that's been identified by NCDOT as a drainage easement is held by NCDOT. Anything associated with culverts or bridges serving city right-of-way will be held by the city. Drainage easements for the purposes of stormwater conveyance that convey public runoff shall be held by the city. They're going to exclude areas required to be in a private drainage easement for SCMs. So in this case, we're talking about you've taken public runoff, it's running towards your SCM. The beginning of that is going to be a public drainage easement. Your SCM itself is supposed to be a private drainage easement. Those would not overlap. And drainage easements held by public entities other than the city or NCDOT are held by public entities. Those are identified as such. So pipe easement widths are not changing. So that's going to look exactly like the old manual.
Slides. All right. So somebody is going to recognize this plan, but the example here is the yellow would be private easement. So this is between two rows of townhouses on private property, catching flow from the private property. That's a private easement. Then we get to the right of way, and we're not in the right of way yet, but we're in the last piece before the right of way. This part is in the right, the blue part's in the right of way. That's clearly public, city maintained. This pink part, this actually has to meet the right of way design standards because you have to up to the next structure. So if there was a structure right here, you'd only have to meet the requirements to here, but because the next structure is here, this part also has to meet the city requirements. Next slide. This is further downstream in the same development. So in the right of way, including that's all city. Now we get to the SCM easement. That's where it stops. Now let's say the SCM easement wasn't over here, but came in over here, then this would still be city pipe downstream of the road. So this is a big change. It's a big gradual change, meaning the city is taking over more pipes than we used to. So if you have pipe systems downstream of a public road or a city parcel, the city is getting a public easement and we will take care of those pipes. Any questions about that?
The pink one in the previous example, is that in a public easement now because we're making it pink and following the public?
This isn't a private easement, but because there's no structure between this section of pipe and the right of way section, it would have to still follow the public right of way requirements. But if this designer could choose to put a structure just outside the right of way, and then that would change.
So the developer is responsible for the pink pipe and so if something breaks, you gotta figure out where in the pipe it broke to figure out who's responsible.
Yes,
But you're not making the developer or the designer put in a structure on the right of way to make it easier to figure out.
we decided not to require that
Okay,
because that potentially requires a lot more structures.
it does.
So, yeah, so there
So
could
it's
be
just
a,
a weird easement situation by the normal pipe.
yes,
Wonderful.
yeah. All right, thanks.
Right. All right, 4.2.6 is decreased capacity downstream. So your proposed system has higher capacity than an offsite component immediately downstream. You will have to provide a narrative description of why the design is necessary and any required special maintenance, a map identifying locations where new surcharging will occur, and an analysis of the impacts of the surcharging. Yes.
Does that mean since the design standards for pipe capacity are greater than they used to be, this will occur often?
We have specifically seen this happen on a lot of roadway projects where, you know, the scope of the project is a certain area and the scope is not to then upgrade everything downstream, but someday it will be upgraded, which is why this process would be in place. But it could also apply to private sites because the city does not have a requirement to analyze or upgrade existing drainage systems downstream.
The previous design standard was 10-year level of service versus 25 now, is that right?
Molly is going to get to that.
Every tie-in is gonna face that potentially. You might do an existing system.
No, there's a certain amount of things that aren't.
4.2.8 is connecting to a conveyance system in the city right of way. So there will be a new permit that will be issued. It's called a stormwater conveyance system permit. And all connections shall be performed in accordance with the city of Raleigh details. So there'll also be details to follow for this new permit type. And we'll discuss it more later. Specifically, this is one of the details that's in the works right now that is used for a lot of like roof tie-ins into boxes. When a finalized one is created, it'll be put on the website. 4.3.1 is our closed conveyance system sizing criteria. So we've separated it out into a drainage area less than and equal to and greater than 25 acres. So your less than or equal to 25 acres is going to have 2 design storms, the 10-year to be at or below the crown of the pipes and the 25-year to be at the top of the inlet structures or gutter elevations.
So that's what hasn't really changed. We're being more specific about where the HGL has to be, but it's still essentially a 10-year sizing requirement.
And then for your greater than 25 acres, you have a 25-year storm for your at or below the crown of the pipes. And a 100-year storm for outside of the right of way in addition does not exceed the limits of the drainage easement. .3.2 is our open channel conveyance system sizing criteria, also split by 25 acres, looking at the same design storms. just specifically giving limits based on top of bank or limits of the drainage easement. This one is on our open channel easements. So there's a table in chapter 7.2. That's going to be your minimum easement widths for open channels or swales. And that's also going to be based on that drainage area. So less than 5 acres, 5 to 25, 25 greater. And to note, this is going to apply to channels and swales that are not jurisdictional waters or regulated streams with riparian buffers. Yes.
About sheet flow coming from site drainage area,
Yes.
and having to add an easement, would it follow this, the 50-foot on each side of it? If it's, let's say the upstream is more than 25 feet, it would be 100-foot easement going through it.
This is specifically if there's like a channel going on.
Okay, and then that was my next question. It did mention sheet flow coming in. Are we supposed to provide a channel to convey that through our development, or?
No, you would only be providing the easement that would be for specifically for sheet flow. You would be looking at an easement.
Stream drainage easement is that we have a frequent issue, or we have a sometimes issue in the city where upstream development ends up discharging, say, to somebody's backyard, right? And that causes a lot of problems. So we're trying to address that problem, and sort of like stubbing out sewer to future development or stubbing out a drainage easement, but you don't have to construct the conveyance.
Is there a width that we have to make that easement? 20 feet. 20 feet. Thank you.
4.3.3 is our bridge and culvert sizing criteria. So specifically, the city has looked at what qualifies a bridge as a federally qualifying bridge, and based our bridge and culvert sizing information on that. So for any existing or proposed, any culverts in an existing or proposed city right-of-way that span 18 feet shall be upsized to exceed 20 feet. So 20 feet is that delineator between what is a qualifying bridge and what is not. Bridges 25 feet or less in span along the center line of the structure will require approval by the city's transportation director, and the spacing between the barrels must not exceed half of the diameter of the barrel of the culverts. This is also discussed within the UDO in 938, and there is additionally a table within the design manual that talks more about it. Bridge and culvert easements. So you're going to have 10-foot offset from the structure, including the head walls and wing walls. So it's not 10 foot from the end of the pipe, it's 10 foot from your head walls and wing walls. If it is larger than a 36-inch opening, an access path to the invert will be required. This will be a 20-foot width, 25-foot width, and can be from a side street if necessary. And no slopes can be greater than a 3-to-1. So just providing a path of access to be able to work on structures. The inlet details have changed. So we are switching over to NCDOT. So the inlet type, it'll be NCDOT. There will be a detail that the city puts out that is all of the NCDOT details that are automatically accepted by the city. Not the actual, like, we're not like copy pasting details from NCDOT. We're just saying that that one is a approvable one, no questions asked. 4.3.4 is our inlet and gutter sizing criteria. This will apply to roads and driveways located within right-of-way, public drainage easements, and on a city-owned parcel. Specifically with our submittals, we're going to be looking for a table that includes structure number, bypass structure, spread, allowable spread, and a column indicating whether that spread has been met. In table 4.4, there's a run through for that inlet gutter sizing criteria. some of the big items from that are gonna be that the design storm is now a 10-year design storm. And your inlet should be designed assuming a 50% blockage for locations where great inlets are required. In combination inlets, only the great portion would have a 50% blockage. There are also more stringent requirements that'll apply when there's no curb overflow available. 4.3.5 is maximum ponding depth. So for yard inlets outside of the right of way, 1 foot above the inlet for the 10-year storm. Fire lanes, this is going to be a really specific scenario. So it shall not exceed 7-inch depths at the 10-year storm. It is going to be assumed to be met in areas with a 6-inch curb. So fire lane has a 6-inch curb. We're assuming that you're.
And to further clarify that, if the curb has overflow, it's assumed to be met. If you have a retaining wall on the other side of a curb, then you need to show the calculations.
.4 is our stormwater pipes. So there's a variety of changes in here. Minimum diameter for any stormwater pipe is going to be 15 inches. To be clear, this is separate from the plumbing system associated with the building. This is stormwater pipes. So a minimum 15-inch diameter, a minimum 2 foot of cover. The max slope has changed to 10%. All tie-ins shall occur at a structure, and there are 3 approved pipe materials: reinforced concrete, polypropylene, and high-density polyethylene. Yes.
Requirements, is that just within the city right of way, or is that private on-site also?
But it actually varies by, this is the general requirements. There's some specific requirements that she'll go through for each pipe type, and those differ between the city right of way and the on-site.
Is there gonna be a difference with estimates as well? Like outlet pipes?
Yeah, well, if we specifically say if you have a embankment over 3 feet tall, it needs to have a concrete outflow, barrel through the embankment. But if you're talking about like underground retention, these don't apply.
Yes.
Does that 2 foot of cover include the entire pavement depth?
Yes.
Yes. Back again.
One other one, the HGL, a little bit ago, are HGLs required for a private, say, a commercial stormwater system?
No, they're required in the public right of way, in the public drainage easement. And
City owned parcel.
and city owned parcel. But basically that was in terms of the inlet sizing, oh, we're talking about the HDL, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, they are, but only like up into the parking lot. You don't want smaller systems going up to buildings or landscape coverage.
So what do you use for the HGL or private site? The same as you do the city?
Yes,
10 and 25?
yes. This was a frequent comment during our comment period, and it was discussed and determined that we would go forward with that as a protecting the public issue. There is, and we'll, I don't know actually that I have this in there specifically, but we do have a design exception process. So there is an opportunity that if you, I don't see us approving it as an exception for the public right of way, but if on a private site you wanted to apply for a design exception for, we can consider that.
Say you have some constraints for a site where you're having trouble getting that in 3 feet of cover, can you switch that over to class 4 or 5 pipe and then reduce that cover requirement?
Yeah, that would, I think, also follow the design exception, but yes. That's, because we had to take this very technical manual through the review process that involved a lot of people who are not technical experts. We left this design exception route. It goes up stormwater to the engineering services director, so it goes up through an engineer.
Great. Okay, so those are the ones that apply in generic stormwater pipes. There's also going to be specific information for each type of pipe. So here is an example detail that'll apply to all the pipes, as it has a typical section A and typical section B for your different flexible versus rigid. Yet again, this is not a final version, but this is just an idea of what the detail would look like for your backfill specifically.
And this is, I will say that like this and these other, we started with conveyance because we knew there would be the most questions on this. This is something we went through a lot of iterations. We got comments from designers. We also talked to both the concrete pipe industry and the flexible pipe industry in creating this detail about backfill requirements.
It's public and private, right?
Yes.
And the details will be done by November 2nd?
Yeah, yes, they are super, super close to being done. They're basically the person doing the CAD is making our back check edits, so. We thought we had hoped to have them published by today, but it'll be definitely before the end of October.
With the changeover kids here, you're still keeping like the 5 foot over through, that's still an option or that?
No, that is going away. It's actually a maintenance issue. Our maintenance crews have very much requested that we switch to the DOT type because it's like 5 feet of cast iron with not a good way to get inside it. Yes, that's the read there.
Are details gonna be available in DWG?
I need to check with various people at the city about that. And I don't know if the previous details are not available in DWG, and it's not clear to me if that was because the city did not want to provide them, or if the webmaster said you can't have a DWG. So I need to find that out.
Are knockouts allowed?
I would say, so,
Are knockouts allowed?
we have not said anything about that, so we would be deferring to the DOT detail on that.
You want to hold more questions to the end, Sally?
Yeah, that might be good, until the end of the, just to the end of the pipe section.
It's about to get fun. All right, 4.4.2 is our reinforced concrete pipe requirements. So we have specified an acceptable joint type that needs to be shown on your plans. There are requirements specific to transitions from RCP to PP or HDPE, knotted structures, and prior quality, pipe quality prior to installation. That'll also require notes on your plans. So just I'm looking at pipes before somebody's putting them in the ground kind of situation. Not something where like, we're going to be looking at your pipes. We're saying you need to say that your pipes are going to be looked at.
Yeah, it references national standards.
Yep. And there's also a specific language about lifting holes. 4.4.3 is our polypropylene pipe. That is only going to be allowed on private property or specific city streets within the street design manual, the local, the sensitive area, residential street, and residential alley. The specifics on polypropylene. It will be type S, a smooth interior. The maximum diameter for polypropylene is 48 inches, and your maximum cover is going to be 20 feet. Also, joint specifications listed on the plans. These are going to require a watertight connector to structures. Also something that we expect to be on plans. They will require mandrel or laser testing when we get to the as-built, which we'll discuss more because in section 4.7.4, but Sally will talk more on that. Yes.
So would be allowed that, HDPE would be allowed on private property.
She's gonna get to that HDP.
Oh.
Yeah, this is just polypropylene. Okay. 4.4.4 is our HDPE, high density polyethylene, which will only be allowed on a parcel. So type S, smooth interior, max diameter 48 inches, max cover is 17 feet, different than our polypropylene. Joint specifications listed on the plan, backfill specifications shown on the plan, mandrel laser testing required, to discuss later. 4.5.1 is channel configuration, 4.5.2 is channel lining. So the maximum side slopes for vegetated are going to be 3:1 with a minimum longitudinal slope of 1%. All vegetated conveyances shall be sodded. And when you're proposing a channel, you're expected to provide a table that has the channel segment, slope, drainage area, proposed velocity, proposed discharge, channel lining, and the maximum channel lining velocity, either on the plans or in the SCR, which is just your stormwater report. 4.6.1 goes through the minimum criteria for drainage structures. So specifically looking at table 4.6. So a couple of the big parts of that is going to be that your lid needs to be capable of being removed for immediate concerns, not needing like a backhoe or anything to get it off. Interior dimensions, essentially your manhole as it goes deeper gets bigger. All structures must be labeled. Dump no waste, drains to river. And steps are going to be required when structures are 3 foot 6 inches or deeper. 4.6.2 is end treatments. So end treatments are going to be required for all stormwater conveyance pipes. A flared end section or a head wall end wall for all pipes smaller than 36 inches. A head wall and end wall for all pipes 36 inches or greater. Questions? I wasn't expecting the question slide. Yes.
Back at the beginning, the downstream discharge, there were 3 options. I guess right away.
Right of way, stream, or easement.
Right.
Yes.
So typical site, through device and level splitter, it's still acceptable, but I guess proximity.
So the way it is written, that is not an acceptable method.
Because I thought we talked about this in the wrap down.
Yeah.
Your neighbor or joint property.
And we were,
Is that not true?
that, we were told, like, we heard that comment, we chose not to accept that comment. But we had to rewrite how it was in the manual. So we're not requiring you to obtain an easement, but we're requiring you to do one of 3 things, which is either discharge to the right of way, discharge to a stream, or discharge to an easement. Which is essentially the same thing, but it's written differently.
I think people have asked their requiring an easement on joining side. Require discharge at the rear. So that line.
Right, basically, we're trying to address the issue where, okay, it all goes to a level spreader, but it's still all this, the volume of water, as opposed to the peak discharge, the volume of water has increased.
So if you can't get an easement for your neighbor, what is up?
Yes.
We talked about this at length.
Yes.
Right, and then we came with the upstream easement, which I thought was addressing your concern long term. I'm surprised to see it this way, but obviously we talked about it a dozen
Yeah.
times.
This is where I'm gonna say, then you need to call Ben Brown.
Well, I assume there's a design set. I mean, honestly, it's not a bad idea to try to obtain a down easement for your neighbors, but again, as I mentioned before, the neighbors don't want us building anything anyway, so that's a hard stop. Right after, I guess there had to be more conversation. All right, moving on. The CCTV for existing pipe and condition.
Yeah.
When does that happen? How do we initiate that?
Right, so, so we're going to start commenting on that with the first time we see your project, so if that's an ASR or subdivision, we'll comment then. If that's a SPR, we'll comment then, whenever it's first required to come in. Or if it's city right of way, basically, we will go ahead, once we see that your project is being proposed, we will request the city CCTV crew do that work if it hasn't already been done in the past few years. And then we'll forward that information on. I don't believe we were specific about whether it was at the end of preliminary or at the end of SPR that you had to have completed your analysis. I will check that.
The storing and pipe division comes from municipal side.
Yes, it's what's in, I will talk about that in the permit piece.
And, on road main pipe is allowed by NCDOT, but I see you have limited it to certain street sections for municipal streets.
That's correct.
And then 48-inch pipe size for polyroad and HDP, I assume is exclusive for conveyance, not for storage for SCM.
That's correct. These are conveyance requirements. The requirements for SCMs are different.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to, analyzation of existing downstream conveyance systems. If we're reducing, peak flows at all areas kind of leaving the site that are going through an existing downstream system, would that eliminate the need to analyze that system for reducing pre-development flow to it?
So the only time you need to do this is when you are putting a bigger pipe into a smaller pipe. That's the only time that any downstream analysis is required. So we're trying to address that specific situation, but if you've got a 15 going into a 15, you don't have to analyze downstream. Because we assume that the peak discharge requirements are keeping you in the design capacity of that pipe.
So I'm sorry, the double one, if the existing system is over capacity and you're meeting proposed,
We
not
do not hold a private site accountable for the capacity of the offsite pipes. So if downstream it is over capacity, as long as you're meeting your peak discharge requirements, we are saying that is acceptable.
well, there's a threshold. What I guess if you're at the prior, just 25 years long, it was spread, et cetera, across your front. Is that
For the adjacent pipe, yes. So, yes. But that's only, and that's really about, it's less about downstream capacity as about addressing the conditioning capacity of current infrastructure. We see the places that most going to come up is like downtown projects where we see people, the building is going out to the lot line. There's a pipe 10 feet away in the ground. We want to know if that's in good condition and has the capacity, because we want to replace it with the development instead of having to come back and shore it later. Did I see somebody over here? All right. Thank you for the questions. I should ask Lauren, do we have online questions I need to address? Okay.
I've gotten stuck.
Okay, thank you. All right, I am taking over this presentation from Lauren Witherspoon, who unfortunately is dealing with her family in Western North Carolina right now. So I will do my best. If there's questions I can't answer, we will get back to you all. Which I should mention, if you didn't sign in when you came in, please do that during the break. We want to make sure we have the number of attendees and everybody's email if we're emailing out updates, including I'll email the slides afterwards. All right, so we are creating a new permit. It's called a Stormwater Conveyance Permit, or SCON or SCONE. We'll see which name catches on. It has two purposes. One is to get as-built drawings, which we inconsistently receive right now because we don't have a specific process for it. And that is to address our MPD SMS4 requirement to do asset inventory. Therefore, this requirement is for pipes 12 inches and larger because that's what's written into the MPDS permit, even though we require a minimum pipe size of 15. This is also to improve the quality of the infrastructure that we get by requiring inspection. We already do some inspection of things in the right of way using our in-house resources, but this is going to require third-party inspection, and I'll go through that in more detail. This is just the overview of inspection requirements in terms of CCTV, mandrel testing, and then the NBIS inspection form for pipes greater than 72 inches in diameter. Okay, so this permit is required if you meet the following criteria. If it's located in the right of way, if it is public or private, 12 inches or larger, and if it's any size in the right of way, and if it conveys public runoff, we don't care what size it is, we need to see it. Public runoff being city street, DOT street, or city parcel. What was that? There's a few exceptions which I'll hit on. So if there are private pipes that are less than 12 inches and don't go into the right of way, we are not looking at those. So like landscape drainage, that sort of thing. And we don't require a permit if you are repairing or placing pipes that don't convey public runoff. And basically that's like if you're not changing the hydraulic capacity. So there's a couple of situations where it's not required. Then the requirements for as-built and inspection are more detailed, and this is all at the end of chapter 4 in the manual. But basically, like, some things have to get a permit. Then it addresses, do you have to submit calculations? Then it addresses, okay, now do you have to do an as-built? So for example, driveway culverts do not have to do as-built or CCTV, because if we have the design drawing, we're going to be able to find it in the field, and we're going to be able to look and see if it's in sufficient capacity to accept, where that's not the case for most closed systems. All right, there are 3 processes where you would obtain a stormwater conveyance permit. So for most of you, that would be, it would be part of your SPR, your site permitting review, that we would issue a stormwater conveyance permit. If you're doing smaller work, we will, for driveway culverts and pipes under 12 inches that are entering the right of way, we'll accept those with building permits or zoning permits. This is an example of a permit, and over here it says, it gives the requirements for the as-built survey, as-built red line drawings, and certification prior to final inspection and CO, so that you'll be able to find the conditions associated with the permit in terms of what additional steps are needed. That will be on the permit itself. All right, calculations essentially unchanged. If you're installing a pipe and changing the hydraulic capacity, you need to submit calculations. You know, for the most part, people are already doing that. And so that will continue to be reviewed by the stormwater plan reviewer. The one difference during the plan review phase is that once we've approved your storm drainage design, we will need an electronic CAD file prior to permit issuance, and we can do a hold for that. And you'll email it to this address, which is in the manual, and the plan reviewer, so that they know that you've done it, so they could say remove the hold. What we will do with that is we will put it into our GIS system as like pending infrastructure, and we will assign facility IDs. And this lovely QR code, which we will be providing you with, will have those facility IDs. So the idea is that then when you submit your as-built and your CCTV, it should reference these facility IDs so that we can keep track of everything. All right. As-built are required for new, repaired, abandoned, and replaced pipes greater than 12 inches in diameter, not including driveway culverts. You're going to submit that after it's been installed. You can submit it. Submit it fairly early on in the process. The as-built don't need to come at the end of construction, so you could go ahead and do that once the pipes are installed. There's an as-built checklist that is not up yet, but will be in the next couple weeks. We have 2 required checklists, one for pipe as-built and one for SCM as-built. The survey needs to be done by a professional land surveyor. The certification of the system needs to be done by a PE. We need surveyed elevations and a red line of the plan so that we can see what has changed. And then the submittal address is the same one as for SCM as-built. And like SCM's as-built, this gets set up as a review in EnerGov, so you can look at it through the permit portal. And Lauren notes that this could hold up your CO, so do it. Give yourself plenty of time. Again, this can be, the as-built part can be done early. In terms of the inspections, that there's, I hope she has it in the slides of when that has to happen. So basically, greater than or equal to 12 inches up to a 72, you have to do CCTV. And if you're repairing city controlled pipes, you have to do the CCTV. For folks who are just connecting a smaller pipe into the right of way, we don't want CCTV of their less than 12-inch diameter pipe, but we do ask it for still photos of their connection to either the gutter or the box so that we know that that was done correctly, and we will go inspect it. All right. Oh, here we go. I hope this is in there. So the inspection information should be done prior to the final lift of asphalt being installed. In many cases, it will give the procedure to flush the pipes prior to the CCTV work, and the stormwater inspectors will be involved in that. The third-party CCTV operator must be NASCO PACP certified, and that is, I don't think she has this in the slides, that is because the acceptable condition is tied to the NASCO PACP scoring system. And so I believe it has to get, oh, there we go. The next bullet. If it gets a defect score of 2 or greater, or structural O&M defect score of 2 or greater, then you need to submit a repair plan of how you will address those issues. And that comes in with the inspection report. We require third-party mandrel testing for flexible pipes. The bridge inspection report if it's over 72 inches. And again, this comes into the as-built submittal email. And this will get spread out among different people in stormwater. So the plan reviewer will look at your as-built, but our asset management team will look at your repair plan and your inspection data. That is a new requirement. I'm sure there's questions. Yes.
Just want to verify the CCTV is required on all pipes, whether it's concrete or plastic.
That's correct.
Who reviews the CCTV? Does the engineer do that?
The engineer is reviewing the CCTV. It should also come with that NASCO scoring, like there should be an inspection report from the CCTV provider that identifies those. But yes, basically the city is spot checking it. and we're requesting the data. But we are not going to watch every video.
So we'll now need as-built surveys on all the stormwater systems that are installed.
12 inches and greater, and this is because the city has to, as part of our NPDES permit, inventory everything 12 inches and greater.
So we separate that out when we submit as-built for water and sewer. Or can that all be part of the same plan process, or?
No, it is separate.
Okay, so the water sewer has to be pulled out of the CAD file, and it's just the stormwater for this too.
Yes. Other questions on this yet?
Is there a checklist or a list of which one that cat file, because I've had some current troubles on what's actually being asked for.
Yes.
That file.
That there, and that will be up in the next couple weeks. Yeah. It should be pretty specific. If it's if it's not, I will get them to add that. I will, so this permit will be issued to things submitted November 4th and later. The exception, I know some of you do work for the city. We have already started issuing this permit for city projects. So if you're doing a city project, please talk to your city PM. And I believe we already have a spec that can be used for that. Yeah.
So this conveyance permit is just for piping, it's not for stream.
At this point in time, it's for pipes and swales, but not for, say, stream restoration. That could be incorporated in the future, but that hasn't been determined. There. Not if it was submitted before November 4th.
So is the timing of this permit, it's issued during SPR, and is it closed out at as-built, or does it run concurrent with property, kind of like the one in?
It is closed out at as-built.
Flexible pipes, manual and CCTV required?
Yes. As an option, you could do CCTV and laser profiling. It's actually mandrel or laser profiling. Either of those. All right. Anyone else? All right. We are going to move on from conveyance and go to hydrology. We're going to hit a couple topics here where there aren't many changes, but we want to make you aware of the changes that are there.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Sally said, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel with not many changes. We're just kind of streamlining everything. So I'm going over chapter 3, hydrology. So the overarching changes, we heavily streamlined the chapter contents, anything that can be found in references material we excluded. Therefore, we removed several equation references as well as figures and some example problems. For drainage area delineation, we simply added more guidance on how to show your selection of analysis points, determining your drainage areas, as well as providing the proper exhibits for your pre and post conditions. For your hydraulic methods, we provided a table for the appropriate uses of methods for your certain design application. And this is our approved methods based on that type. Also, we added a list of several approved software for analysis. I'm not going to read each and every one of them, but they are listed in the design manual chapter. I don't know if this is extensive.
Yeah, basically, this is things that currently meet the requirements in the manual. Other software is acceptable as long as it meets the requirements that are listed.
Right. Specifically in the update, we noted methods that are not allowed. This includes the chainsaw routing method, the modified rational method, as well as the simple method. And to be clear, this is for runoff volume, not for designing SEMs. For the NRCS curve numbers, we created a table that provided comparisons from the TR 55 land cover descriptions to that of the Raleigh zoning districts. Again, image there, and it can be found in the chapter. It's a quick reference on the equivalent when you're using the NRCS method. For the rational method coefficients, we also updated them to reflect the 2013 HEC 22 drainage design manual, as well as added runoff coefficients that corresponded with the Raleigh zoning classifications. Additionally, we note that in the manual for runoff, for rainfall data specifically, we are aware that NOAA is currently updating its atlas information. So any effective rainfall data will be referenced on our website, as it will be constantly changing. So as I said, pretty simple, straightforward. Were there any particular questions? Nope. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, I am going to cover stormwater management calculations as opposed to SDM design. So basically, how do you show compliance? All right. And then Sean is going to hit a bit about that won't apply to many of you who don't work with small builders, but some of you do. All right. In terms of changes to the manual in the field of stormwater management calculations, the biggest change is not really a change, but basically chapter 3 of the old manual has been out of date. And so we are updating it to reflect the new rule changes that went into effect 1.5 years ago. And there was written guidance online for this that much of that got copied and pasted into the new manual. And then we are trying to further encourage the use of volume reduction to meet our green stormwater infrastructure goals. And this is where I a little bit get to put on my GSI advocate hat. We really like volume reduction because it has many benefits. So things like infiltration, practices that use evapotranspiration and rainwater harvesting, because they have those multiple benefits, as opposed to the single benefits that you get from settling infiltration and detention mechanisms instead of volume reduction. So we have 2 paths for compliance in the nutrient requirements, either runoff volume match, and I know that there's some issues with what the state is currently accepting, and we did not have time to fully address that in this version of the manual, so I anticipate that being in the next update to the manual. We are going with what has been published by the state, which I understand is not what they are actually following. But basically, we say if you're doing runoff volume match, there's part of this, there's sections that apply. If you're doing the traditional route and meeting 3.6 pounds per acre, these sections apply, and for both certain sections apply. Some of this this next part I'm going to go through is not really a change, just maybe highlighting some common misunderstandings or things that have been our practice but weren't as explicitly written down. So for both the runoff rate control and the nitrogen calculations, the regulated area includes the entire parcel area or parcels area, the newly dedicated right-of-way, the existing right-of-way in locations where you are adding built upon area or you're paying fee in lieu for built upon area. And if you are dedicating a greenway easement on the site, you need to account for the greenway in the calculations. There's basically one difference between the rate control and nitrogen regulated area, which is in the nitrogen calcs, we don't let you include any other areas. And in the rate control calcs, you have to include your calculations will have to include, and your drainage area maps will have to include what actually flows onto your site in order to show the offsite flow moving through your conveyance systems. And we will say most, and I can't remember if it explicitly says this, but the easiest to read submittals that we get have separate exhibits for the nitrogen boundary and for peak discharge control. We just wanted to briefly touch on subdivisions with regulated site area. So, and those who do it probably are well aware of this. If it's a multi-phase subdivision, each phase needs to separately show compliance. Those phases can be dependent on them, but that needs to be identified in the report so that it's clear that, say, if you have phases A, B, and C, maybe C has its own SCM and totally stands alone, but maybe you can't build B until you built the SCM that comes in phase A. Something like that needs to be reflected. In terms of, this would most often come up for commercial subdivisions. One of the things that the state NUS rules said that we needed to deal with is like the build out associated with a subdivision. So that will come up. This has come up a couple of times with projects that have lots that could stand alone under our rules. So lots over an acre. So a commercial subdivision, lots over an acre, but they're building the roadways to serve those lots. We need to, in terms of whether it's a higher low density project that needs to provide their primary SCM, we need to know if the project as a whole will be over 24%, not just ignoring what was going to be on those parcels and looking at the roadway.
Do that. Oftentimes you have to, give a certain amount of right of way. So that 24%, is that going to, and you've got, a little roadway impervious, I guess it has to be added. Is that relative to the gross site or the net after you've done the right of way dedication?
For sites subject to the full stormwater rules, B 922 B through H, that's the full site, including the area that the newly dedicated right of way. Does that address your question?
But you add that to your gross number. So in other words, if
Yeah.
you're tight on net versus gross, that's going to potentially change your percentages a little bit, somewhat.
I don't know if we're saying the same thing. So this is your parcel. You're doing a commercial subdivision with a
Right.
cul-de-sac.
Let's say that.
Or if you're subject to the full stormwater rules, this entire area, including this, is part of your calculation.
Once you don't even have that road, you're just fronting any road. And you
An
have
existing.
10 feet of right of way. And then let's say you have to add a sliver of pavement over there. So you've got your net, which is minus the right of way.
Right.
For your road.
Yeah, your project area will include that strip.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's within that 24%.
Ah, I see what you're saying. That's a good question, and I might need to get clarification on that.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought you were saying versus things that fall under, that are the residential under 1 acre where we do the calculations differently. We wanted to address what our thinking is on points of analysis. So this is in the manual. You need to address it's long been in the UDO, each point where flow leaves the parcel. And it's now explicitly in the manual that means a separate point of analysis for each pipe system, even if if inlet A and inlet B have any pipes that they don't share, then you need to separately analyze them because we care how much about the pipe capacity of the things in between. So if they join up later downstream, we need to know what goes to each part. We have a little flexibility for improvements in existing right of way. And one of the key things is when you have, say, existing flow going to several parcels on the same side of your development, you have to analyze the flow to each of those parcels separately so that we make sure we're not diverting flow from one parcel to another parcel. That helps address the big pipe into somebody's backyard. We continue to get questions about common plan of development. Unfortunately, I don't have anything new to say about it. But if you think you're in the situation where this mostly comes up for small developments that are kind of on the threshold, that may be combining some parcels. If you think you might be in this situation, please contact me and we will get, we basically haven't been able to get our legal team to weigh in on this without any examples. So, we're waiting for your examples to come up. I think I wanted to hit water quality volume for the primary SCM requirement because this is an area where we see confusion. So you have to, you calculate your required water quality volume based on your new built upon area. Your provided water quality volume is based on what is actually treated, which could be different VUA than what you're adding. But for the 1 inch storm, we've had some people say, well, couldn't we make it twice as big? But then you'd be treating it at the 2 inch storm, not at the 1 inch storm. So we will give you credit. This is something we've started allowing for treating existing right of way if it isn't already treated. You can, and it's clear in the state rules that you can treat existing BUA instead of your new BUA. So if you're addition at a site, that's something you can do. You can't count an existing SCM as the treatment unless you are showing that it could receive additional impervious area or you're retrofitting it to provide additional nutrient removal. We have made the judgment call that because it's just a feasibility thing, that if you cannot get your new BUA in the existing right-of-way, as opposed to newly dedicated right-of-way, like a new street, in the existing right-of-way, if you can't get to an SCM, we'll allow that, but it's still to be in your calculations to meet the nutrient threshold.
Are you differentiating between DOC right-of-way and city right-of-way?
No.
Treatment?
No. Anything else on that? Okay. This is the rule that's been in place for 1.5 years. And then what we're looking for in this middle, we are required to collect an Excel file from you once we've approved the SCM calcs. All right, I'm going to hand, are there any questions? A lot of that was existing information, just clarifying. I'm going to hand it over to Sean. Oh, yes, Lauren. Oh, I think I knew who asked that question. No, not you, Jason, the other person who's coming on. Basically, I looked at a lot of engineering reference material, and we could not find any manuals, like either federal manuals or regional manuals using modified rational that had climate similar to us. We found like Texas manuals that used modified rational, but nothing that was similar to North Carolina. So if you want to provide me that documentation, we will revise this manual in the future. Yeah.
Point of analysis line had a last column was you had to do analysis of each discharge of each for each adjacent parcel.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have an issue where there's a big undeveloped site, and down here we've got single family houses. And what we've seen people do is treat this entire line as a point of analysis. and then concentrate the flow and put in a little spreader. And all that flow goes to this one parcel. And so that's not allowed. That's why we need to know how much goes to each of these adjacent parcels, so that in the proposed condition, it's still spread out among those parcels and not adversely impacting one. All right.
So we just realized the owl isn't on, so we'll have to fix that at the break, but it'll be real short. I've just got a little bit about.
Yeah, you have to go through a bunch of slides there.
Yeah, we're on impervious surface limits, and methods to exceed them. I know there's a few folks in the room who occasionally get brought on board with builders or owners to develop plans to exceed those. So, as a reminder, first up, to determine impervious surface limits should always be on the plat. So, often the limits will be recorded on those. If it's one of those grandfathered lots that meets the definition early on in chapter 9.2 of the UDO, it's based on zoning. So have your zoning layer on county GIS. It could be based on that. And then when in doubt, or almost always, just email us at that address, the stormwater.impervious address. There's any number of us that monitor that inbox and could respond to you. There's like different peculiarities based on whether it's an older house that's existed prior to those limits, whether you're in a watershed is a complicating factor. So always good to confirm things with us prior to, starting your design or anything.
Sean, did you say, I might have missed it. Did you say this is for single family under an acre and other uses under a half acre?
I did not. I might get into that on another slide. It's UDO 9.2.2A4. So there's definitions in that 922A for the grandfathered lots or ones created by subdivisions less than an acre since 2016 or since 2001. Basically single lot or single family or duplex residential sites more often than not. We've got three methods to exceed the limits, the percentage limits. One has always been to meet the full nitrogen and runoff requirements of the rest of UDO 9.2. Don't see that too often, but it is an option. So just a reminder there. A volume control device to infiltrate the runoff from the excess impervious surface over the maximum has been an option since 2016. And now with the UDO changes, they're coming to kind of align things with the new design manual. We've got a few other changes in there. Up until recently, we had the downstream flood analyses, as we called them. The flood studies basically demonstrating less than 0.04 foot rise at some appropriate downstream structure was a way to exceed those limits. That is going away and being replaced by peak discharge requirements. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Reminder, there's where nitrogen and runoff requirements are. So just meeting those for a small residential site would be a method to go to whatever impervious surface your stormwater plan could allow. Volume control devices, most often rain gardens, occasionally rain barrels or infiltration devices, if they control the runoff from the amount over the limit for the 90th percentile storm, are an option to exceed limits. And now starting in November, rather than analyzing up to the 100-year storm and showing that less than a half-inch rise downstream, it'll be peak flow requirements for the 2 and the 10-year storm pre to post for the amount over the impervious limit. So similar to the volume control devices, if you're an R4 lot, the amount over 38% of the lot, more often than not, that's going to require a detention SCM, but we see those on residential properties to meet the other requirements anyway. And another thing that's not changing with the design manual, but just a reminder about it because it's relatively new. It changed when the state's nutrient management strategy changed, and we updated the UDO last year to respond to that. Is now lots over an acre and no longer grandfathered. So basically, once they have more than 5% impervious area added since 2001, those lots are subject to the nitrogen and runoff requirements. Just a quick example of how you might figure that out. We basically tell people the short version is 5% of what's left. So here, imagine that orange shaded spot was what's existed for the past 20 or 40 years. The owner now wants to add the back deck and a new front stoop. We'd be dividing that yellow area by the green open area on the property, seeing on which side of 5% that falls. Under 5%, still exempt from stormwater requirements. If more than 5% impervious surface being added to the lot, nitrogen and runoff requirements are triggered. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I know not many.
Only a few
deal
you
with that,
submit
but
those to us, yeah.
some of you do. In just a minute, we'll do a break. So just a couple reminders before we do the break. Restrooms are out the back doors. There's small restrooms to the right and left. There's large restrooms / locker rooms down the hall that direction. We've got snacks and drinks. We will resume at 3:05. Thanks. My slider was not closed. I mean, presumably this was on because they could hear us, right?
Yeah, Lauren said that everybody could hear you.
I'm also noticing the eyes are off.
Yeah. I like bring it out last night.
We need to do the camera drop down.
I had background on.
We just couldn't see or anything like it was
Yeah.
by the time we thought to check, it just was your face logo.
Yeah, it's because I had a fake background on.
Based on the questions, everybody seems like nobody had issues hearing you, but I guess nobody saw the sketch.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I have a couple announcements before we get started. One is that, and I very much apologize for this, I made a mistake about the parking. And it turns out we are not allowed to park in those reserved spaces. So if you have parked in a reserved space, I'm supposed to ask you to move. There may be parking still on Operations Way. If not, you can go directly across Westinghouse Boulevard to the sign shop, and there's a parking lot there. Those gates will be open until 7 p.m. Yeah, my apologies. People have always parked in those before without it being a problem. The other thing, just a reminder, if you haven't checked in, please do that, because I will use that list to send the slides and any updates or clarifications on questions. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Kendall. Are we good on the AV? Let me try that again. Oh, it's because I turned off the camera. Okay, sorry about that. The earlier issue is that I had my fake background on.
Good afternoon. All right, well, we're going to be talking about SCM design in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is pretty long, and we are going to be focusing on the highlights and major changes here. So this is an abridged version of chapter 6. So, yes. So all SCMs that are used for nitrogen reduction must comply with the NCDEQ MDCs, as well as the device-specific MDCs for the particular SCM, as well as section 6.3 of this manual, which is general requirements for all SCMs, and the device-specific requirements in section 6.4, which goes through each SCM and their specific requirements. We do want to clarify that if NCDEQ does approve more devices in the future, we will be accepting those devices. Whatever DEQ has accepted as one of their approved devices, we will accept. Okay, the clicker works, the side button does not. Okay, pumping restrictions. No pumping of stormwater shall be allowed as a necessary component of any SCM except for rainwater harvesting. This does not preclude the use of a temporary pump for maintenance drawdown of an SCM. That is not a change, but it is an important thing to highlight. Some new requirements as it pertains to freeboard. So for impoundments with embankments greater or equal than 3 feet, 1 foot of freeboard between the largest storm with peak discharge requirements and the emergency spillway is required. For most projects, that'll be the 10-year storm, but some projects have zoning conditions where different peak discharge storms are required. Flow from the 100-year storm must be safely conveyed through the primary outlet control structure, which means that no flow should be going over the emergency spillway for the 100-year storm. Freeboard to the top of embankment must be within a minimum of 1 foot above the 100-year storm in elevation. Continued, embankments designed per the NRCS conservation practice standards, Pond Code 378, except for when the stormwater design manual through DEQ is more stringent. Embankments must also comply with the NC dam safety regulations, and the only penetration through the embankment shall be the outflow barrel. Seepage shall be minimized using anti-seep collar or filter and drainage diaphragms. And details for those measures should be placed on the plans as well. Some updates to requirements in proximity to buildings. All FCMs shall be located a minimum of 10 feet from any building unless the following criteria are met. The SCM is watertight. Plastic tanks molded as one piece are assumed to be watertight. Other materials need leak rate calculation or analyses and calculations done. The leak rate specified in testing must be acceptable to the professional responsible for geotechnical and structural design. A sealed letter from an NC licensed structural engineer should be included with the SCR at the time of permitting review. So that's before SPR approval. Continued, if the SCM is in or under a building, a signed letter from the property owner shall be submitted with them acknowledging that the increased long-term maintenance will be at a higher cost because of the location. Adequate access needs to be provided for maintenance. If access vehicles like pump trucks can't directly access the SCM, a letter from a maintenance company indicating they are willing to maintain the SCM shall be required. This may require hose pool diagrams. Requirements about the use of retaining walls in the proximity of an SCM. They may contain ponded water with the treatment volume if a leak rate is established, but it must be used in conjunction with the outlet structure hydraulic design. For walls over 5 feet in height, a sealed letter by the NC licensed structural engineer must be submitted with the SCR, indicating that the engineer is aware of the saturated soil conditions as shown on the plans. Continued. Wall design details must be submitted that demonstrate no short circuiting of the SCM will occur through the drainage structures with that retaining wall. Retaining walls within an SCM must be included in the drainage easement for SCM access, the SCM O&M manual, and the SCM construction cost estimate, because they're effectively a component of the SCM at that point. If the retaining walls are within a wet pond or stormwater wetland, the lowest grade adjacent to a retaining wall must be above the water quality elevation. Any questions to this point? Okay. Plantings. Proposed planting shall not include any species listed as an invasive species. You can find that online through NC State. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a specific link in the design manual.
Okay. Yes. No woody vegetation shall be planted on embankments. Vegetation shall not impede sight distance of any public road. Woody vegetation shall not be planted within 3 feet of the inflow. And woody deep rooted vegetation must not be planted directly over under drains. These are the 3 methods of infiltration testing that we will be accepting when infiltration testing is required. This section, section 6.3.8 plainly states refer to section 7.4 for SCM access and easements. So the requirements stated in 7.4 are that the SCM footprint and 10 feet outside of that footprint must be contained within an SCM easement. If it is a wet pond or a wetland, it must be 25 feet off the edge of the areas where sediment will be removed from, which is the forebay and deep pools. The easement must contain maintenance access to components. The maintenance access easement must extend from the right-of-way to the SCM with a minimum width of 10 feet at max 3-to-1 slopes. And the outfall to the right-of-way, stream, or easement must be concluded in the easement. Yes.
When you go to the it has 25 feet of edge of wet pond and wet and forebay. Is that basically 25 feet of the permanent pool elevation? Or is it 25 feet of the berm when you consider your pond to start?
I think typically it's the berm.
That's a good question. We didn't define that. So let me consult with my coworkers and make a decision.
Yes. Okay, section 3.6.3.10 is on outlet design. It has many items outside of just the three listed here, but we wanted to highlight these three. So definitely familiarize yourself with section 6.3.10. But the major elements were that inlets and outlets shall be designed and located to avoid short circuiting of the measure. The outlet structure must be designed with maintenance in mind, meaning that the outlet shall be accessible by foot in the storm for which the SCM has been designed. Meaning that structures will likely need to be placed closer to the vegetated shelves in design. Wet ponds and wetlands shall include an emergency drawdown feature that is operable above the 100-year water surface elevation. The drawdown rate shall not exceed the flow rate of the 10-year storm. Requirements for all underground SCMs. They shall provide access in accordance with OSHA standards, especially confined space. Underground SCMs must meet structural requirements for HL 93 loading. A minimum of 2 access points shall be required. Access points shall be reachable by a pump truck. They shall not be impeded by vehicular or pedestrian traffic. If traffic control is required, a traffic control plan must be provided and included in the O&M manual. Access manways shall meet the access, interior dimensions, labeling, loading, and steps criteria from table 4.6 of this manual, which Molly went over earlier. Continuing for underground SCMs, each chamber of the underground SCM shall be reachable by a pump truck suction hose. And access provided also shall meet manufacturer's requirements for the specific SCM that you're proposing. City maintained SCMs need to use our standard specifications, which should be available from either us or the city project manager that you are dealing with. We have greatly expanded our submittal requirements in the manual, meaning that we have listed out each thing that we are expecting to be in the stormwater compliance report. We have broken the section out into what needs to be included in the report, what needs to be included on the plans and plan view, notes, cross sections, outlet structures, flow splitters, and outlet protection. These are pretty extensive lists, and if you use it as a checklist, you probably won't get comments saying and requesting other documentation.
Will there be a check?
Yes, that is coming before the end of October.
The design manual will be more specific than the checklist will be, though. Okay, so section 6.5 of the manual goes through each device specific SCM. And so I pulled one up for an example. These sections are broken out into description and applications, additional requirements beyond the MDC, which are only applicable when the SCM is also used for runoff rate requirements. And then there are requirements for city funded projects that are recommendations to be used on all other projects. But for those of you working on city projects, these are requirements. I'm not going to be going through each individual SCM because they are all broken out this way in the manual. And I'm going to hand it over to Sean to go over what he's going to go over.
We've got a little bit about the administrative requirements for SCMs, your easements, your O&M manuals, as-built, et cetera. Oh, I'll stay with SCMs.
Walls and their relationship and proximity to SCMs.
Can you be more specific?
I don't know if this person is asking about if they are within the SCM or an easement. Melvin, if you can type out a quick response for me to verify. Would be by proximity provision.
Yeah, so can you page back to that?
This one. Was there a wall sled?
Yeah. There we go.
Building some walls.
Yeah. So there's really specific things in section 6.3.5. And if you haven't downloaded the manual, Google Stormwater, Raleigh Stormwater Manual, and you'll get it. But basically, in terms of proximity, is the water detained in the SCM touching the wall? If it's touching the wall, then it's part of the SCM. If it is not touching the water that's detained in the SCM, then it is not part of the SCM.
Didn't it say that they can't be below the permanent pool elevation?
It can't be below the, in a wet pond or stormwater wetland, it can't be below the water quality volume elevation, but the detention, like the 2 and 10 year detention could touch the wall. But then it is part of the, it's part of the SCM. But if you can show the 100-year goes through your pond and it does not touch that retaining wall, then it is not part of the SCM.
Would there be any relationship between the maintenance buffer being inside or outside of that wall? Does it need the full maintenance access with inside the wall if that is not touching the water?
It needs maintenance to the major components. Like the maintenance path to get to major components cannot have a drop off of a retaining wall. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Does the 100-year storm, when it's being detained, need to draw out of the 10-year flows?
No. We do not have a requirement for the 100-year control unless you met the requirements for additional stormwater controls because there's downstream structural flooding, or you have a rezoning condition that requires 100-year control. What the 10-year thing that we were saying is for maintenance drawdown, your flow rate can't exceed the 10-year storm. So that it's basically, we've seen the issue where for maintenance, an SCM is getting drawn down, it exceeds the capacity of the downstream conveyance system and causes problems. Is that it? Okay.
Back to the administrative requirements, with the design manual update and the UDO changes related to that, we're kind of consolidating the requirements that apply to all SCMs, like the on-paper stuff or the process things. These are the code sections that they'll be in. Some of them are not changing. Some of them are getting shifted around a little bit. 922B's got the requirements for the O&M manual, easements, the as-built submittals, and the sureties for the devices. G has the maintenance covenant or instrument requirements, and I'll get into the instrument. That's a new thing in a little bit. And then H is the annual inspection requirements. There's going to be a slight change that are kind of more checklisty for a lot of those to be more specific about what's required. O&M manual requirements are, one, O&M manuals are no longer going to be recorded as part of an exhibit to a maintenance covenant. They will just be incorporated by reference into those recorded maintenance covenants, which will make updating them easier to reflect, say, as-built conditions or something like that, or even changes in between, say, submittal and as-built. The full requirements are in the design manual and the UDO. I think both of those sections pretty closely mirror each other and are very much like a checklist. We are going to be requiring exhibits now showing the site, the SCMs, drainage areas, and also the design details, basically smaller 11 by 17 or smaller plans of the SCMs in that document. A narrative and checklist, including, among other things, I think these are some of the more important ones to hit on. description of all the maintenance access procedures, access specifically including confined space for your underground SCMs, certain inspection checklists with frequency for each action and quantitative triggers, if that's a thing that makes sense for that item, say 6 inches of sediment accumulated or after every design storm or a storm of a certain size, something like that. A maximum pumped drawdown rate in GPM, because that's the way pumps think, that will match the 10-year detention outflow rate is what
Yeah,
we're going
but
towards
the
on that.
thinking is that your maintenance people don't think in CFS, they think in GPM.
Yep. List of steps to restore the SCM and its elements in the event of failure. A construction cost estimate still, and we'll be more specific about items to include in that, from both the code change and the design manual. And again, there's full requirements in both the design manual section and in that UDO 922D. On the construction costs, we are going to be asking for, on the things where it makes sense, quantities and unit costs to be listed out. So not just a lump sum for this bond is going to cost us $50,000 to put in, something like that. Won't get into all of those elements, but those are, some of the things that you might end up listing in a table for us in getting to that construction cost estimate. The as-built certifications, we are also getting more specific in the checklist type thing in both the UDO and the design manual on what to submit. A narrative submitted with it. We're going to ask for a narrative summary of any of the deviations, just to make it easy on us and looking at it with the as-built from the approved plans. Surveyed elevations of all the elements. Updated plans and caps if required that reflect any changes in how it functions or what it's doing. Updated maintenance manual if necessary to reflect any changes. All photos are going to be required to be taken within 7 days of submittal. And then if there's plants involved, a receipt or invoice for those. And documentation of any required testing that was supposed to have taken place. Then, we get pretty specific, at least in the design manual, on what photos that we're going to ask to see on either an above ground or a below ground SCM. Some SCMs have stuff that makes sense to take pictures of during installation, say, your under drain system, something like that, the different drainage layers, anti-seep collars and filter diaphragms going in. So make sure those are included. We are now, in addition to the maintenance covenant that gets recorded for shared SCMs or ones serving multiple lots, going to require a similar recorded document for a single lot SCM. We have to call it an instrument. That's what the lawyers have told us. It is not a covenant or an agreement, but it's going to be extremely similar. We'll be providing the standard form to be, I think we're still submitting it to the legal doc review at the time that it needs to be submitted.
The same process.
And then it'll be recorded just like with the maintenance covenants. In this case, prior to building permit issuance. And then not changing with the design manual, but a lot of you are already aware that a little over a year ago, a state law went into effect that in response to that, we no longer require those 24% maintenance payments into our fund. So instead, to reflect what the state law does allow, now in those UDO sections, which reflect either the maintenance covenant requirements or the maintenance instrument requirements, the HOA or the lot owner is going to be required to retain funds over a period of 5 years equal to 10% of the construction cost of the SCM, and just hold that to be available for repairs and maintenance and inspection. And then on the 5th and all subsequent annual inspections, there will need to be a certified statement saying that they've got that money or those funds available. And I think that's what I've got on those.
On the as-built, we require an as-built, say, a pond and verify the volume and submit the as-built with the, riser or the as-built.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I really hit on this, but like the requirements are going to be the same for all SCMs regardless of their purpose. Used to be that a lot of those things in 9.2 were only for the larger commercial or SCMs for nitrogen and runoff compliance, and there were some differences for the residential ones, whether it be watershed or feed impervious limits. Those requirements are all going to be the same regardless of the purpose of an SCM now. So your easements, your sureties, et cetera.
So the 10% funds for the owner to retain, that's just for 5 years, and then after that.
They're
No,
required to keep it going forward after 5 years.
they have 5 years to accumulate it. Then they have to keep it.
Okay.
It's in both that state law, the H488, and now will be in the UDO.
Is there a process for getting refunds of the 24% payments that have already been made?
Yes, but the people who can help you with that don't work in the same building as us.
Yeah, there is a process. You can email me and I will help you, but there's a project underway to get that like more publicized of what the process is. All right, I will go to the next section. All right, so chapter 7 of the manual talks about easements. We've already covered some of those as part of the other topics, but I want to just highlight the new easement requirements. So we already talked about that we're going to have new public easements for pipes carrying public runoff. We also talked about the upstream discharge easement, but we have not yet talked about the we occasionally encounter an issue where there are we had somebody who wanted to put a house on a dam. And so for that reason, we now have a requirement that if you have a dam not associated with an SCM, that if that lot comes in for development, they have to put a private drainage easement on the SCM, on the dam, not the whole lake, but just the dam. That doesn't come up very often, but it's an issue when it does. And then we've added the last part of chapter 7, which is about easements, has a lot of detail about what work you can do in an easement. And this is some of our, like, not necessarily with you all, but our frequent questions from residential customers. But we basically have these principles. And so I know many of you have had to process design exceptions for things like retaining walls and easements, and I'll speak specifically about that, but basically these are our principles of where we would grant a design exception. So don't limit access for maintenance or repair, or come in and then increase significantly the cost of doing that. Impeding the flow of water, that one's mostly about swales. Damaging the infrastructure, don't put your fence post through the pipe, and don't increase the loading beyond the design capacity. So there's some things that we never allow in easements. The asterisks on buildings there being that we do allow SCMs under buildings, and if they meet all those requirements we just went through. So we've tried to be very clear that your head walls and wing walls for your pipes are not a retaining wall. They're a separate thing and they belong in the easement. And then we've gone through really specifically for driveways, which is about depth. There's a lot of requirements about fences. So think about that if you're doing like a single family or townhouse development, and think about where your pipes are in relation to your proposed fences. But I will particularly hit on the retaining wall one here, which is it now says you do not need a design exception if you are putting in the pipe going through the retaining wall and the retaining wall at the same time. We are assuming that you have designed for that situation, and that does not need a design exception. Now, if a commercial property owner comes in and suddenly wants to put a retaining wall on an existing pipe, that is going to require documentation, but we're building it together, that no longer requires any design exception. All right, that was what we didn't already cover in easements. So now it's erosion control highlights with Brian. Who, thank you for stepping up with Lauren Witherspoon not being here.
Filling in. So yes, sediment erosion control. So our guideline for land disturbing activities, also called GILDA, is going away. That document has been eliminated, along with our cut/fill setbacks for retaining walls. We're no longer looking at that separation of 2 feet from the property line or the separation from the building. But it is important to note that the wall needs to be on your property unless you otherwise get permission from the neighboring property. That includes your footers. So that was brought up yesterday about the footers. So that's exciting. For your land disturbance surety, we are increasing the cost from 1,000 to 2,000. It's my understanding that that has not changed for a long period of time. So to keep up with the times, we are updating that. Peak rate of runoff during construction, this has not changed. It's just been relocated. Again, it was in Gilda. That is gone. It is now located in the UDO. We are also having our land disturbance permits have an expiration date, and that is to match similar permitting processes. I believe it's 3 years following the date of the approval, and it will expire if there is no land disturbing activity that has been undertaken. For limits of disturbance, the design manual provides further definitions of what areas can be included in the limits of disturbance, including equipment and vehicle parking, vehicle maneuverability. It just needs to make sense that you're having space for your equipment, clearing and grubbing, material stage and storage, and excavating and filling. Also, construction access, a minimum of 10 feet around structures, extended to the property line if the property line is closer than that. Stockpile requirements. Stockpiles shall be shown on the plans. Slopes should be 2 to 1 or flatter. They cannot exceed 35 feet in height, and they shall be removed prior to the end of the project closeout.
In contrast, see the big spot pile that's not.
For sites greater than 20 acres, for plans, you need to demonstrate how time of exposure and the amount of exposed area is limited on your projects. We'll also require a cut fill analysis to exhibit an exhibit showing where the soils will be moved. If you're relocating soils to another site associated with you, you can reference the SPR number or the building number in the construction sequence. Again, this is all broken down further in the design manual. This is just a quick summary. And again, the construction sequence should detail the phasing to justify the time and the amount of exposure. The calculations and the plan requirements, there's no changes, but it is detailed specifically in section 8.4 of our new design manual. For our construction phasing and sequencing, it's broken down into 3 phases. You have your initial phase of construction, which is where you're installing your initial perimeter measures, so fence entrances. Your intermediate phase of construction, which is where rough grading occurs, your bypassing of offsite water, your infrastructure, pavement, vertical construction, and then finally the final phase and closeout where you're installing your SCMs, you're stabilizing your site, and you're getting your as-built certified. So with that, any questions? Yeah. I would imagine it would be their limits of disturbance.
However, it's worded in the design manual, I would have to go and look. Okay.
How the information being utilized?
Yeah, so this is where I wish Lauren was here, Witherspoon was here to talk, because this has been something she's working on. But the intention here is to limit exposure. And we've had some issues with stockpiles being left on sites and not being stable. So to avoid that situation, basically avoid drainage complaints in the future with.
Well, specifically the analysis, the cut fill.
Yeah.
So by which you can, your delta or haul or hauling for the site.
That's something that is an excellent question. That is one I should be able to answer, but I cannot. And I think that's something we're gonna have to provide more guidance on of what needs to get submitted for this analysis.
As to how you.
Yeah. But again, that's only for sites 20, well, either sites or LODs, 20 acres or larger, I will take a look and clarify that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna run through a little bit about what's changed about chapter 9, which is floodplain management. So just a couple of quick items that we're gonna focus on changes, clarification on the types of special flood hazard area that are defined in the UDO, a little bit about flood studies and the flood study checklist. So the one UDO change that we're going to cover today is the fact that special flood hazard areas delineated and mapped based on a flood study is now included and outlined in the UDO. So this is being added to the other 3 types of SFHA that are already in the UDO. The first one being FEMA designated floodplain. So that is obviously going to be the first place that you look when you're developing a site, is whether there is FEMA floodplain on this site and whether you are encroaching into that floodplain. Another type that's listed is SFHA based on drainage basin study maps. So these are based on watershed studies that the city is currently kind of working through. Those are currently not used or regulated, but it is outlined in the UDO because we anticipate in the future those may begin to be used and referenced as floodplain in the city. Just talked about based on a flood study. So this is the new addition. So these are the floodplain areas that you are mapping in previously unmapped flood hazard areas in the city. And then last but not least is those SFHAs based on flood hazard soils. So where no type of flood study or analysis has been conducted, those flood hazard soils areas are what is being regulated. And so we are making some changes about what triggers a flood study in the city, and also we are introducing a slightly different type of simpler flood study that can be done in certain circumstances depending on what kinds of activities are going on the site. So right now, your site is triggering a flood study if there are flood hazard soils on your site that are being encroached in, or if there are 400 linear feet or more of stream on the site. So the flood hazard soil requirements are staying the same. Those are not changing, but rather than triggering a flood study at 400 linear feet of soil, we are now introducing a drainage area threshold instead. So that 400 linear feet is not being used when the new manual is in effect. It will be a drainage area threshold. So I set up this flow chart that hopefully will be helpful to kind of work your way through figuring out whether you do need to do a flood study, and if so, if you have to do kind of the full-scale flood study that is outlined in the UDO and the manual right now, or if you're able to do a slightly simpler type of flood study that we're introducing. So the first thing, so you're going to look whether there are flood hazard soils present on the site. If the answer is yes, then you're also going to have to look at the drainage area going to that site. So if there are flood hazard soils and the drainage area is less than 5 acres, you do not have to do a flood study. It does not matter if you are encroaching into those soils areas or not. You do not have to do a further flood study. If your area is greater than 100 acres, you are going to have to do what is called a comprehensive flood study. And this is the flood study that is currently outlined in the UDO and the design manual. I'll refresh you guys on that in just a second, the difference between comprehensive and simple. But this is kind of the more intensive flood study. If you're in between those two, if your site is draining less or greater than 5 acres, but less than that 100-acre threshold, you may be able to do what we are calling a simple flood study. Again, more on that in just a second. If there are no flood hazard soils present on your site, but your property is adjacent to a stream or channel, again, this is a new kind of slightly different take on this flood study trigger. If there's no flood hazard soils and no stream on your property, you don't have to do a flood study. That might seem kind of obvious, but we include it just so you know. If there is stream on the site, again, we are going to look at the drainage area going to your site going to that stream channel on your site. These are slightly different drainage area thresholds than the flood hazard soils, so just keep that in mind. Those drainage area ranges are slightly different depending on whether you have flood hazard soils on your site. If you just have the stream adjacent, or you just have the property adjacent to a stream, no soils, and your site is draining less than 25 acres, you do not have to do a flood study. Again, if it is greater than 100 acres, you will have to do the full comprehensive flood study. If it's in between 25 and 100, again, may have the option to do a simple flood study. And this slide just shows you the same information that I included in the flow chart, but this is how it's outlined in the design manual. So this is what you'll see in the manual itself, kind of outlining which type of flood study is required. And I will also say that anywhere that your site qualifies to be able to just do a simple flood study, you are welcome to do a comprehensive flood study, that more detailed study. You are always welcome to do that, but there may be situations where the simple flood study you can get by without having to do a full study. So kind of breaking down the differences between the two. So a simple flood study and a comprehensive flood study, they are both establishing the 100-year or 1% annual chance existing and future conditions, water surface elevations on your site. And those water surface elevations are used to establish the RFE, regulatory flood protection elevation, that everything on your site is going to have to comply with. And then here's where we get to the differences. So during the simple flood study, a floodway delineation is not required. So there may be situations where, again, if you kind of are doing a simple flood study and you are using one of the approved methods that we've listed here, which can include HECRAS, it could also include something slightly simpler like Manning's equation or just an NCDOT headwater analysis. There may be situations where you do one of these slightly simpler methods where you have a site where there's a stream on your site, but where you're developing on the site is quite far from the stream, relatively speaking. So you are able to provide us Manning's equation or some other sort of analysis showing that none of your activity, none of your encroachment is anywhere near your floodplain area based on that Manning's equation calculation. That may be okay. But if you do one of those simpler analysis methods and you are showing activity, fill, cut, structures, anything in that floodplain area based on your Manning's equation, your other simpler method, you are showing activity in that floodplain area. We say you don't have to require, you aren't required to delineate the floodplain, but in that case, you would have to assume your entire 100-year floodplain boundary is the floodway for regulatory purposes. So you would be subject to all of the floodway regulations in the UDO in that case. So that is a situation where, again, technically based on your drainage area thresholds or your flood hazard soil presence, you may not be required to do a full-blown comprehensive flood study where you have to delineate floodway versus flood fringe. But if you're encroaching in certain areas, it may benefit you to delineate that floodway to show that you are not encroaching in a floodway area versus just a flood fringe. And again, kind of on the comprehensive side, which is kind of the flood study process that's outlined right now in the UDO, approved methods that we're looking for, it can be one-dimensional. We also accept 2D models, any modeling platform approved by FEMA for floodplain modeling. So we typically see HECRAS, but again, we understand that there are other softwares out there that may also be FEMA approved and has similar capabilities. And then the one caveat that I've kind of noted down here is that if your site may qualify for a simple flood study based on the drainage area thresholds, but if there is a structure, so a bridge, a culvert, roadway, anything of that nature that has the potential to impact water surface elevations on your site, we will require you to use a calculation method or a modeling method that accounts for backwater from that structure during the 100-year flow event. And then just a quick note about submittal and checklist. None of this is really changing. Flood studies will still be submitted as a separate SPR, site permit review process, separate from your other stormwater reviews. And there is a flood study checklist available. So this has been available in the past and is currently being revised and revamped to match the new design manual and any other UDO changes that have been made. So that checklist will also be available for use by you when you're submitting flood studies once the new design manual is in effect. I think that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the middle for that flood study would occur at your preliminary subdivision or ASR, that when it submitted.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you work to better align that 30 business day time frame that whose development process is following? Currently, I think you have the 30 business days.
Yes.
Is that possible to look into that? Ideally, if you have both of those, that'll do it wants to react to it.
That is not a change we're gonna make immediately, but
Okay. And then I think the other side of that, the word adjacent was curious. What does adjacent mean?
Yeah.
How adjacent.
Great question. So typically we are interpreting adjacent right now to mean, either on site or if the stream is close enough to the property line of the site that it is reasonably expected that the floodplain in that area would be on your site. So potentially impacted by development on that site.
so there's definitely some judgment
Yeah.
there of, you know. But with the simple flood study option, there might be an opportunity to, you know, use the variance equation to show, hey, it's not on our site.
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Does it depend on site type of when the flood study would need to have approval? Like basically, or site plan versus SPR? Yeah, so we are not changing the requirement that if, the flood study needs to be done at preliminary, unless the impact is something that's being required by the city. So if the city is requiring you to say, construct a road through the floodplain, then it can be done by the SPR. Would that address it? You said it's outlined in the UDO. I need to think about where that is. Okay, but that is unchanged, but, yeah. I think that's actually the new design. And that's for local and. Yes, any flood study required by the city. Or required to develop, yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of an important caveat that I may not have emphasized is that a lot of these changes are specifically related to local flood studies. So if you are developing in an area where there is an existing FEMA model, you would be required to kind of use that model for your analysis. We wouldn't allow you to kind of reinvent the wheel and make your own kind of model depending on the drainage area. So, yeah. All right.
I'm gonna have to talk briefly about submittal requirements. Don't have a whole lot to say really, but I can point you to where to look for those. Where am I here? We're just getting more specific in the design manual now that we're updating it. Not a whole lot really changing except for like, say, things associated with new requirements. We are just listing out the things we already asked you guys for. So here's some spots to look for our, here, let me maximize me. So that's where to look for the things we'll be looking for with your submittals, with your stormwater compliance reports or your lot grading plans if you're working on residential properties. So that section 2 of the design manual is going to have most of it, but then there's some additional requirements depending on what a project is going to involve with those other chapters of the design manual. So chapter 4 for the conveyance, submittal requirements and as-built and all of that. 6 for the SCMs, erosion control stuff in 8, and 9 for the flood studies stuff that Allison just talked about. But look there, it's got a list of all the stuff we'll ask for. That's it.
All right, so we're actually running early, so that's good. So I will pause here for questions on anything that we've talked about thus far. Also, the staff will be here till 5, so you're welcome to, if you have individual questions, you can follow up with us individually. All right. So I just have a couple wrap-up slides. So we've kind of already talked about this, but we have the standard, the stormwater and GSI portions of the city standard design details are being updated to coincide with this manual. So that's both drainage design, erosion control, and the GSI details. Those will, like I said earlier, those are like the CAD work from our back check is being done right now. So those will be posted before the end of the month for sure. And the checklists we are also working on, and there won't be any, there's nothing new in the checklist. Like there's no requirement in the checklist that isn't in the design manual or the UDO. But the idea is, and those will be, the checklist will be required for as-built submittals, both pipe and SCM as-built. The other ones won't be required, but they're a tool. And then we are also working on some web updates, mostly actually for the non-technical audience. We definitely got feedback from the public about, hey, we don't understand what the design requirements are. Can you explain it to us? So we're going to try to do that. So if you take nothing else away today, Google Raleigh Stormwater Manual and download the manual and take a look at the proposed UGO changes. They'll become, if those things will be effective for submittals starting Monday, November 4th. You can choose those requirements for earlier projects. I could see people choosing them, say, for flood studies or something like that, where it might work out well for your project. And then we know this is a lot of new information, and we encourage you to contact us if you have any questions as you're working on submittals for after November 4th. We've got our whole team here. I'll put up the contacts for questions. As Sean mentioned earlier, we have that stormwater.impervious that's monitored by multiple people. That's a good one if you have kind of a generic question to get, and you don't care who answers it. And then I put mine up there, and then because I'm going on vacation this month, I put Sean's up there too. And then if you have inspection questions, that's Lauren's contact info. Okay, last chance for questions before the group. Nathan?
Yeah, I got a question. Okay, I had more time, so maybe I can get some of this. On the new public drainage easements, is there a recorded instrument that goes along with it on the plat?
That's a good thing to bring up, Nathan. So that is actually part of the instrument. So either in your covenant or in your instrument, there will be a dedication of easements. Along with that.
Shown on the plat.
Right.
Legal documents.
Yeah, the city attorney's office hates us just showing things on the plat because that is not the right way to do things. So they will be dedicated with that instrument or covenant. Thanks.
Well, and maybe you have mentioned too, with regard to the post-construction requirements like CCTV advice, technical requirements, are those effective immediately November 4th? Or do those go along with the project? What do you submit prior to the?
That goes along, all of these requirements go along with when you submit it. Yes. Unless it's a city project, in which case, because we are the city, we're already issuing ourselves stormwater conveyance permits. Hunter.
There's a note about freeboard on SCM. If the ponding depth is greater than 3 feet, 1 foot of freeboard is required.
Ponding depth against fill soils. And so it's impounded water against fill soils. So we were trying to avoid, say, bioretention and big like berms having to have freeboard because they would generally not fall into that.
Okay, so I guess my question is going to go toward fire retention. The SDM manual, the state manual does say 1 foot of freeboard. So is that a conflict, or is the SDM manual?
Oh, that's a good question. I will have to read the state manual in more detail.
And I guess the subset question was for GSI, particularly small devices, is there also a drainage area trigger where that can be relaxed?
Our intention was that small devices would not have that 3 foot and then not have that requirement, because we want to encourage small installations of GSI without having to make them bigger to account for having freeboard. And really the freeboard is about risk, and the risk of a smaller installation is lower, so. Yeah.
One of the slides had berm for impoundments that can allow North Carolina dam safety requirements. You expand on that a little bit, is that height or?
Right, basically, if you trigger the state requirements in terms of like high hazard dams, then you have to follow those requirements. So just kind of a covering that. Yeah. Yeah.
For infiltration devices and the design requirements, the reference 12 inches of head to remove infiltration, what does that refer to?
That is a good question, and that came up in our internal review, and I need to look into it further. I will say I inherited this manual, so there is some things in there that I did not put in there, and I need to investigate. Yeah.
Is there guidance on access easements to either green roofs or SCM, like rainwater harvesting that's inside of a building or structure?
Not as much for, this is where, so Kendall, we didn't have her go through every type of SCM, but there is very specific requirements for green roofs in terms of access. And then I don't think we addressed rainwater harvesting internal to a building. But I would say it's, if there's some situation we haven't addressed, we could probably cover it with a design exception. Yeah.
About no deep rooted plants over underground, how does that affect like the use of trees?
Yeah, that again was something I didn't write. And so I would read that as directly over the underdrain, and so that if it's, because we elsewhere in there allow trees over pipes if there's a 5 foot depth. So I would say if it's not centered on the pipe, we would allow it because we like trees.
Right.
They're good for stormwater. Yeah. Yeah.
Over flood studies, local flood studies, I think recently we've been asked to do comparison of existing versus post conditions. Is it now just post conditions?
So the reason, if you were doing something in isolation, you would only be doing existing conditions. The reason the post conditions are also needed is because it might trigger the need for flood storage easements, which is a type of easement we didn't talk about today because it wasn't changing. So we need to know that you're not increasing the water surface elevation on anyone's property that's not the subject of the development. And if you are, then you need a flood storage easement.
That's a lot.
Where that still applies, yeah.
Raleigh, or can we still do rainfall runoff? You can do rainfall runoff.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming. I will be following up with an email providing the slides and addressing some of the questions that came up. If there's anything we didn't address, feel free to email me. And yeah, we will be here till 5, so feel free to talk to any of the staff. Thank you.